Before we begin today's story, let us know in the comments section what time and part of the world you are listening from. Also, if you enjoy today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless Appalachian rain as Emma Morgan gripped the steering wheel of her rental car, knuckles white with tension. Tears blurred her vision, mixing with the streaks of rain that distorted the world beyond the glass. The mountain road twisted ahead of her like a wet ribbon, each curve a new challenge in the growing darkness. "You're being pathetic," she muttered to herself, angry at the way her voice cracked. The text messages from David still burned in her mind. "I can't do this anymore. The distance, your constant traveling. We're just going in different directions." 3 years together ended in a string of digital words. She pressed harder on the accelerator, as if speed could somehow outrun the hollow ache in her chest. Her phone buzzed again, probably her editor, Charlotte, demanding to know where her next story was. Emma ignored it. The thought of crafting another perfectly curated travel piece for her millions of followers made her stomach turn. The Wandering Pen, they called her, the mysterious blogger who transformed ordinary destinations into extraordinary narratives. If only they knew she was running out of words, out of wonder, out of the very passion that had once made her writing sing. The first flash of lightning illuminated the forest around her in stark relief, ancient pines reaching toward an angry sky. The thunder that followed was deafening, and Emma flinched, her grip on the wheel faltering for just a moment. That's all it took. The car's tires lost their grip on the slick asphalt. Emma's heart stopped as the vehicle began to slide, her desperate attempt to correct the steering only making things worse. Time stretched like taffy as the guardrail approached, then disappeared beneath her headlights. The world tilted, and Emma screamed as the rental car plunged down the embankment. The descent was a chaos of motion and sound, breaking branches, crunching metal, the sharp smell of wet earth and burning rubber. When the car finally came to rest, tilted at an awkward angle in a shallow ditch, Emma sat frozen, her hand still clenched around the steering wheel. The engine made an ominous clicking sound before dying completely. "Oh God," she whispered, checking herself for injuries. Besides a few bruises from the seatbelt and a small cut on her forehead, she seemed intact. Her phone had disappeared somewhere in the chaos. Outside, the rain continued its steady assault. Emma forced her door open, stumbling out into the downpour. Her designer boots, perfectly suitable for city streets, slipped in the mud as she tried to assess her situation. The rental car was wedged between two trees, its front end crumpled like used tissue paper. Smoke or steam, she couldn't tell which, rose from under the hood despite the rain. "Hello?" she called out, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Is anyone there?" The road above seemed impossibly distant, and her phone was still missing. Panic began to claw at her throat. That's when she saw him, a tall figure emerging from the trees, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Emma's heart rate spiked again, torn between relief and fear. The light swept over her, then the wreck, before settling back on her face. "You're bleeding," the man said, his voice deep and quiet, barely audible above the rain. He kept his distance, as if afraid of frightening her. The flashlight beam lowered slightly. "I'm fine," Emma replied automatically, though she could feel warm liquid mixing with the cold rain on her forehead. "My phone. I need to call for help." He moved closer, and Emma could finally make out his features in the dim light. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain and a beard that looked more practical than fashionable. His clothes were simple: flannel shirt, work pants, boots that had seen better days. "No signal up here," he said, studying the wreck. "Not in this weather. My cabin's about half a mile back. You can wait there until the storm passes." Emma hesitated, weighing her options. The stranger hadn't moved any closer, giving her space to decide. There was something solid about him, steady, like the pines surrounding them. "I don't," she started, but another crack of thunder cut her off. The man, she still didn't know his name, simply turned and started walking back the way he'd come, his flashlight beam creating a path through the darkness. "Your choice," he called over his shoulder, "but hypothermia is a real possibility out here." Emma looked back at her ruined rental car, then up at the invisible road above. The rain was getting heavier. "Wait," she called out, stumbling after him. "Please." The walk to his cabin was silent, except for the storm and their footsteps on the wet ground. Emma's entire body ached, and her clothes were soaked through. When a small structure finally emerged from the darkness, its windows glowing with warm light, she could have cried with relief. "I'm Luke," he said as they reached the porch, finally introducing himself. "Luke Callahan." He held the door open for her, and warmth spilled out into the night. "Emma," she replied, stepping inside. "Emma Morgan." She waited for any sign of recognition. Her blog had made her name well known in certain circles, but Luke's expression remained neutral as he followed her in. The cabin's interior was surprisingly spacious, dominated by a stone fireplace where flames crackled steadily. Simple, handcrafted furniture filled the space, and Emma noted the absence of modern amenities. No television, no visible electronics beyond a basic radio on a shelf. The walls were lined with books. "Bathrooms through there," Luke said, pointing to a door. "First aid kits under the sink. I'll find you some dry clothes." Emma nodded, suddenly awkward in this stranger's space. "Thank you. I can pay you for helping." "Don't worry about it." Luke cut her off, disappearing into what she assumed was a bedroom. He returned with a flannel shirt and sweatpants, both clearly his. "Get cleaned up. I'll make coffee." Alone in the small bathroom, Emma studied her reflection in the mirror. The cut on her forehead wasn't as bad as it had felt, but her expensive outfit was ruined, and her carefully styled hair hung in wet tangles. She looked nothing like the polished profile picture on her blog, the one that showed her posed thoughtfully in front of a sunset in Santorini. Right now, she looked exactly how she felt, lost, broken, and completely out of her element. When she emerged in Luke's too big clothes, she found him in the kitchen area, measuring coffee grounds into an old percolator on a wood-burning stove. The domestic scene struck her as somehow both foreign and familiar, like a memory from someone else's life. "The storm's supposed to last through tomorrow," Luke said without turning around. "Road crew won't be able to get to your car until it passes." He paused, then added, "You can take the bed. I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't." Emma started to protest. "You're injured," he stated simply, as if that settled everything. Emma sank into a chair at the small kitchen table, watching as Luke moved efficiently through his space. The coffee's aroma began to fill the cabin, mixing with the scent of wood, smoke, and rain. Outside, the storm raged on, but in here, time seemed to move differently. She should have been terrified, alone in a remote cabin with a stranger, no phone, no way to contact the outside world. Instead, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple permission to just be still. "Thank you," she said quietly, and meant it. Luke finally turned to look at her, really look at her, and Emma felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with her millions of followers or carefully curated online presence. His eyes were kind, despite their guarded expression. "Get some rest," he said, placing a mug of coffee in front of her. "Tomorrow's soon enough to figure things out." Emma wrapped her hands around the warm mug, watching the steam rise in the firelight. Tomorrow would bring complications, calls to make, decisions to face, truths to hide. But for now, beneath the shelter of pine trees and in the company of this quiet stranger, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The morning after the crash dawned with an intensity that made the previous night's storm seem gentle in comparison. Emma woke to the sound of thunder that shook the cabin's foundations and the relentless drumming of rain against the windows. From the bedroom, she could hear Luke moving around in the main space, the familiar clinking of cups and the soft crackle of the morning fire providing an oddly comforting soundtrack to the storm's fury. When she emerged, wrapped in a borrowed quilted blanket, Luke was already at the wood stove, his morning ritual in full swing. Without speaking, he handed her a steaming mug of coffee, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The slight contact sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the hot beverage. "Roads are washed out," he said simply, looking out the window at the deluge. "Thompson Creek's overflowed. We're stuck here for at least a week, maybe more." Emma's stomach tightened. A week. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange relief. "I should be panicking," she admitted, taking a sip of the rich coffee. Luke's mouth quirked slightly. "Probably. But panic won't fix the roads." That first day set the pattern for those that followed. Luke, she discovered, lived by the rhythm of necessity rather than time. Morning began with coffee and tasks essential to survival. Checking the generator, ensuring their water supply, maintaining the fire that was their only source of heat and cooking capability. "You need to learn this," he told her on the third morning, showing her how to properly stack wood in the fireplace. Just in case. His hands guided hers as he demonstrated the correct placement, and Emma found herself more focused on the rough warmth of his palms than the lesson itself. The forced proximity created an intimacy neither of them had anticipated. Emma learned to read Luke's moods in the set of his shoulders, in the way he moved through his space. She noticed how he relaxed slightly when she mastered a new skill, building a fire, operating the percolator, identifying which mushrooms were safe to gather from the surrounding forest during breaks in the rain. One evening, after a particularly successful attempt at baking bread in the wood stove, Emma's triumphant laugh was cut short by a massive thunderclap that plunged the cabin into darkness. Without hesitation, Luke's hand found hers in the blackness, steady and reassuring. "Count with me," he said softly, and together they measured the distance of the storm until the backup generator hummed to life. Neither mentioned that their hands remained linked for several moments after the lights returned. The breakthrough came on day 5, when Luke discovered Emma's phone beneath the passenger seat of her wreck during a supply run to the car. The screen was shattered, but Luke spent that evening meticulously repairing it, his large hands surprisingly delicate with the tiny components. "Why did you learn to fix phones if you live off the grid?" Emma asked, watching him work by lamplight. Luke was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Sometimes," he finally said, "it's easier to fix broken things than broken people." The weight of unspoken history hung in his words. "And sometimes," Emma responded softly, "broken people fix themselves by fixing things." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them. The days began to blur together, marked by small moments that grew increasingly precious. There was the morning Emma attempted to make pancakes and set off the smoke detector, leading to both of them frantically waving towels while dissolving into helpless laughter. The afternoon, Luke taught her to identify bird calls, his voice low and close to her ear as they stood on the porch, sheltered from the rain by the overhang. During the worst of the storms, they would sit by the fire, sharing books from Luke's extensive collection. Emma discovered he had a particular fondness for Jack London, while she introduced him to her favorite travel memoirs. Sometimes they would read in comfortable silence. Other times, they would discuss the passages late into the night, their conversations growing deeper as the hours passed. One evening, as thunder rolled overhead, Emma found herself watching Luke as he read, the firelight playing across his features. She realized with a start that she knew the exact way his brow furrowed when he was concentrating, the particular angle of his smile when something amused him, the careful way he turned pages as if each book was precious. "You're staring," he said without looking up, but there was a gentleness in his voice she'd grown to recognize. "Just thinking," she replied, pulling her knees to her chest. "Dangerous occupation. So is living alone in the woods, yet here you are." Luke closed his book, marking his place with a worn leather bookmark. "Here we are," he corrected softly, and Emma felt the weight of those 3 simple words settle around her like a blanket. The storm raged on outside, but within the cabin's walls, something else was brewing, something neither of them was ready to name, but both could feel building with each shared moment, each accidental touch, each understanding glance. Like the forest around them, it grew quietly but persistently, taking root in the spaces between words and the silence of shared breaths. The revelation came unexpectedly, on a night when the rain finally gave way to a clear sky filled with stars. They sat on the porch, sharing a bottle of whiskey Luke had produced from some hidden cabinet, when Emma's curiosity finally got the better of her. "You built this place yourself, didn't you?" she asked, noting the precise joinery of the porch railings, the thoughtful architecture that seemed both rustic and quietly sophisticated. Luke's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his glass. "Yeah," he said after a long moment. "Used to design buildings like this for other people. High-end mountain homes, vacation retreats. Had my own firm in Charlotte." Emma turned to study his profile in the starlight. "What changed?" "Sarah." The name fell from his lips like a prayer, or perhaps a eulogy. "My fiancée. She was driving up to surprise me at a project site 3 years ago. Black ice on the mountain roads." He took a long drink. "They said it was quick. Small comfort that." Emma's heart constricted. "Luke, I'm so sorry. Couldn't stay in the city after that. Couldn't keep designing dream homes for people who'd only use them 2 weeks a year." His voice was rough with memory. "So, I came up here, started building things that mattered. Furniture that would last generations, cabins that could weather any storm, things Sarah would have loved." Without thinking, Emma reached out, her hand finding his in the darkness, his fingers interlaced with hers, holding on as if she were an anchor. "I get it," she whispered, running away, building walls. Luke turned to her then, his eyes reflecting starlight. "Your turn," he said softly. "What are you running from?" The whiskey had loosened something in Emma's chest, or maybe it was just Luke's honest vulnerability demanding equal truth in return. "Everything. Nothing." She laughed without humor. "My whole life is about running. The blog, the constant travel. I tell myself it's about freedom, about sharing experiences with my readers. But really, I'm terrified of staying still long enough for anyone to see through the carefully curated posts. And what would they see? A fraud." The word burned, coming out. "Someone who writes about finding beauty in remote places, but has never felt at home anywhere. Someone who's had 3 failed relationships in as many years because she can't commit to anything more permanent than a hotel reservation." She told him about David then, about the text messages, and the way her successful career had become a hollow performance. 10 million followers, she said bitterly. "And I've never felt more alone." "You're not alone now," Luke said simply, and the truth of it brought unexpected tears to her eyes. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, and the porch lights flickered once before going out completely. In the absolute darkness that followed, Emma felt Luke's presence more acutely than ever, the warmth of his hand in hers, the sound of his steady breathing. "Emma," he said, her name a question in the darkness. She turned toward his voice, and somehow in the darkness, they found each other. His free hand cupped her cheek, thumb gently wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The kiss, when it came, was as natural as breathing, soft at first, a gentle exploration that deepened as Emma's hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. Luke kissed her like he was mapping uncharted territory, with careful attention to every detail, the way she sighed when his fingers threaded through her hair, the slight tremor in her hands as they gripped his shirt. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I haven't felt this way since," he started. "I know," Emma interrupted gently. "Me neither. Not ever." The lights flickered back on, but neither of them moved. In the soft glow, Emma could see the vulnerability in Luke's eyes, matching her own. They had both built such careful fortresses around their hearts, his in wood and solitude, hers in miles and carefully crafted words. Yet somehow, in this remote cabin beneath the stars, those walls were crumbling. Over the next few days, their relationship shifted like season changing, gradual yet inevitable. Luke began teaching Emma more intricate woodworking skills, and she found herself sharing stories she'd never written about, the real experiences behind her polished blog posts. Their evenings by the fire took on a new intimacy, with Emma often reading aloud while Luke worked on small carpentry projects, their comfortable silence punctuated by meaningful glances and gentle touches. "I used to think being alone was safer," Luke admitted one evening, as they lay on a blanket watching the stars through a break in the clouds. "That if I just stayed here, worked with my hands, kept to myself, I couldn't get hurt again." Emma propped herself up on an elbow, studying his face. "And now?" He turned to look at her, his eyes soft with an emotion that made her heart skip. "Now I'm thinking maybe some risks are worth taking." She leaned down to kiss him then, slow and deep, trying to pour into it everything she couldn't yet say. How he made her want to stop running. How his quiet strength had begun to heal parts of her she hadn't known were broken. How for the first time in her life, she was terrified, not of staying, but of leaving. When they parted, Luke brushed a strand of hair from her face with calloused fingers. "Stay," he whispered, and Emma knew he meant more than just for the night. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too," he said, pulling her closer. "But I'm more scared of letting you go." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, witnesses to two people slowly learning to trust again, to love again, to build something new from the ruins of their past lives. The morning sun pierced through the pine branches, casting dappled shadows across the cabin's wooden floor. Emma woke to the unfamiliar but comforting weight of Luke's arm draped across her waist, his steady breathing warm against her neck. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply exist in this perfect bubble they'd created. Then her phone buzzed. The repaired screen lit up with a cascade of notifications, missed calls, texts, emails, all flooding in at once. The mountain storms had finally cleared enough for signal to return, and with it, reality came crashing back. "No," Emma whispered, carefully extracting herself from Luke's embrace. She slipped onto the porch, closing the door quietly behind her. 27 missed calls from Charlotte, 15 urgent emails. The most recent message made her blood run cold. "Emma, your mysterious disappearance has actually worked in our favor. Readers are desperate for your next piece. I need something raw, something real." A fellow editor mentioned rumors of a reclusive craftsman in the Appalachians, exactly the kind of authentic story our audience craves. "If you've really been stuck up there all this time, this could be the biggest piece of your career. Call me ASAP." Emma's hands shook as she lowered the phone. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open. "Everything okay?" Luke's voice was still rough with sleep, concerned. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Emma felt tears threatening to fall. "Just work catching up with me," she managed, turning in his embrace to bury her face in his chest. She breathed in his familiar scent, wood shavings, coffee, something uniquely him, and tried to memorize it. "The roads should be clear by tomorrow," he said softly, and Emma heard the question he wasn't asking. "Luke, she started, but was interrupted by another buzz from her phone. Charlotte again. "Found him. Luke Callahan, former rising star architect who disappeared after personal tragedy. Emma, this is gold. The mysterious craftsman living off the grid, healing through his work. It's perfect for your brand. Tell me you can get this story." Emma felt sick. She decided to go wash off and clear her mind, which was already lost in thoughts. She'd left the phone behind her. On getting back, she looked up to find him holding her phone, which she'd left before going to wash up. His face had gone pale, eyes fixed on the screen. "I was making coffee, and it buzzed," he said slowly. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview notification. Emma's heart stopped as he read aloud. Charlotte Davies. Emma, this is perfect timing. Our sources confirmed the reclusive craftsman story in the Appalachians. A former architect turned hermit after a personal tragedy? It's exactly what we need. Get close. Dig deep. This could be your biggest piece yet. The mysterious Luke Callahan story will go viral. They want me to write about you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. About your work, your story, why you came here. Luke's face transformed by understanding and betrayal. Is that what this was? His voice was terrifyingly quiet. Research for your next viral post? No. Emma reached for him, but he stepped back. Luke, please. What happened between us? It's real. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. How can I believe that? The pain in his eyes cut deeper than anger would have. Was any of it true? Or was I just good material? The broken man in the woods, healing through his craft. He gestured bitterly at the cabin around them. The perfect story for your perfect blog. That's not fair, Emma stood, tears flowing freely now. I hid my identity because I wanted to be anonymous, to just be myself for once. With you, I finally felt like I could breathe, like I could just exist without performing for an audience. Except you were performing. Luke's voice cracked. Every moment, every conversation, it was all just material for your story. No, Luke, please. Emma reached for him again, but he turned away, bracing his hands against the porch railing. You should go, he said, still not looking at her. The roads will be clear tomorrow. You can get your car towed then. Luke, I've been through this before, Emma. Losing someone. But at least Sarah was honest with me until the end. He finally turned to face her, and the devastation in his expression made her physically ache. You were never really here, were you? Not the way I was. Emma stood frozen, words failing her completely. Everything she wanted to say, about love, about truth, about how he had changed her entire world, seemed hollow in the face of his pain. Finally, she walked past him into the cabin, gathering her few belongings with trembling hands. When she emerged, Luke was gone. The only sign of his presence, the fresh wood shavings on his workbench, still warm from the morning's project. Emma left her repaired phone on the kitchen table, unable to bear taking the instrument of their destruction with her. As she walked down the mountain path for what she feared would be the last time, the pine trees seemed to whisper accusations in the morning breeze. She had come here empty and lost, and Luke had filled her soul without even trying. Now, leaving him behind, she felt hollower than ever before. The city lights blurred through Emma's apartment window, a constellation of artificial stars that felt cold compared to the natural brilliance she'd witnessed in the mountains. 3 weeks had passed since she'd left Luke's cabin, but time seemed to move differently here, too fast and too slow all at once. Her laptop screen glowed with dozens of unopened emails from Charlotte, their subject lines growing increasingly desperate. Where's the story? Deadline approaching. Are you alive? Emma ignored them all, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she stared at the blank document before her. She had tried writing Luke's story 100 different ways, each attempt falling short of capturing the truth. How could she possibly distill those precious weeks into clickbait headlines and carefully crafted paragraphs? The thought of reducing Luke's grief, his craftsmanship, his quiet strength to mere content made her physically ill. Instead, she began to write something else entirely. Not about Luke, but about herself, about the hollow pursuit of digital validation, about finding authenticity in an age of carefully curated lives, about learning to be still in a world that never stopped moving. She wrote about the peace found in morning rituals, the meditation of working with one's hands, the profound silence of forests after rain. I came to these mountains running from everything, she typed, the words flowing freely now. What I found instead was the courage to stand still, to breathe, to exist without filters or followers or carefully chosen hashtags. Sometimes the greatest journeys aren't measured in miles, but in moments of genuine connection with ourselves, with others, with the simple truth of being alive. The piece took shape over sleepless nights and coffee-fueled mornings. Emma poured everything into it: her fears, her revelations, her transformation. She wrote about the gift of anonymity, the beauty of imperfection, the raw honesty found in places where cell phones couldn't reach. She titled it simply, "Beneath the Pines." When Charlotte finally read it, her response was immediate. "This isn't what we discussed, but it's your best work yet. Raw, honest, universal. We'll run it tomorrow." The story exploded overnight. Comments flooded in from readers who saw themselves in Emma's journey, who yearned for their own escape from the digital treadmill. Interview requests poured in from major networks and publications, all wanting to know more about the mysterious location that had transformed the wandering pen. Emma turned them all down. "My story isn't unique," she wrote in her only public statement. "We're all searching for something real in a world of carefully crafted illusions. Sometimes we find it in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected people. And sometimes protecting that reality means keeping it private." Meanwhile, in his cabin beneath the pines, Luke found himself unable to escape Emma's presence. She lingered in the coffee cups she'd used, in the small improvements she'd made to his daily routines, in the way the morning light hit the kitchen table where they'd shared so many conversations. He discovered her article by accident, overhearing two hikers discussing it at the local supply store. That evening, he sat by the fireplace and read her words on his old laptop, his heart growing heavier with each paragraph. There was no mention of him, no hint of their specific location, no details that could lead anyone to his sanctuary. Instead, Emma had written about transformation, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, about finding home in the spaces between heartbeats. She had protected him, even at the cost of her biggest story. "Sometimes," she had written, "the most important stories are the ones we keep to ourselves, tucked away like precious stones. Their value measured not in views or shares, but in how they change us." Luke read the piece 3 times that night, each reading revealing new layers of meaning, new understanding of Emma's choices. He thought about his own journey, how grief had led him to hide away from the world, how Emma had somehow slipped past his defenses and shown him that healing didn't mean having to be alone. In the workshop behind his cabin, Luke's hands moved almost of their own accord, shaping wood into familiar forms. He created a small box from cherry wood, its lid inlaid with a delicate pattern of pine branches. Inside, he placed the note he'd been drafting and redrafting for weeks, each version trying to bridge the gap between hurt and forgiveness, between fear and hope. The box would sit on his kitchen table, waiting, as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, waiting for Emma to find her way back home. The autumn air was crisp with possibility as Emma stood at the base of the familiar mountain trail, a worn backpack her only companion. 3 months had passed since she'd left this place, though her heart had never really gone. The path ahead wound through trees ablaze with fall colors, crimson maples and golden birch, interspersed among the eternal green of the pines. In her bag, along with basic supplies, she carried a single book, the same worn copy of Jack London that Luke had read to her during those storm-swept evenings. She'd found it in a small bookstore in the city, the exact same edition, and the coincidence had felt like a sign. The hike up was both familiar and new, each step stirring memories while revealing subtle changes in the landscape. Where summer storms had once made the trail treacherous, fallen leaves now cushioned her steps. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that danced across her path like nature's own welcome home. Emma's heart pounded as she crested the final ridge. The cabin stood exactly as she remembered it, smoke rising lazily from the chimney into the crystal-clear sky. But something was different. The porch was empty of the usual stack of firewood, and Luke's truck was nowhere in sight. Her hands trembled as she climbed the porch steps. A season's worth of pine needles crunched beneath her boots. The door was unlocked. Luke had always said locks were pointless this far up the mountain. Inside, the cabin held its breath, clean and cared for but distinctly uninhabited. "Luke," she called softly, knowing already there would be no answer. The main room was exactly as she remembered, yet subtly transformed. New pieces of furniture dotted the space, a delicately carved reading chair, a small table with intricate inlay work. Each piece spoke of hours of careful craftsmanship, of emotions worked out through wood and patience. On the kitchen table sat a cherry wood box, its surface gleaming in the afternoon light. The lid was inlaid with an exquisite pattern of pine branches, so detailed she could almost feel them whisper. With trembling fingers, Emma lifted the lid. Inside lay a single piece of paper, covered in Luke's distinctive handwriting. "Emma, I read your piece, not the story they wanted you to write, but the truth you chose to tell instead. You protected this place, protected me, when revealing it could have given you everything you'd worked for. That's when I finally understood. You were here. You were real. It just took me too long to believe it. I've spent 3 months trying to build things worthy of the person you showed me I could be. Each piece in this cabin holds a piece of you. The chair where I imagined you reading, the table where I pictured us sharing coffee. If you're reading this, it means you found your way back. If you're still running, this place is still yours to stop. I'll be in the clearing where we watch the stars. Some things are meant to last." "Luke." Emma pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling freely now. Through the back window, she could see the path leading to their clearing, lined with trees wearing their autumn finest. Without hesitation, she stepped out into the crisp mountain air. The clearing opened up before her, a natural cathedral with pine trees as its pillars. And there, standing in a shaft of late afternoon sunlight, was Luke. He turned at the sound of her approach, and Emma saw everything she felt reflected in his eyes. Hope, fear, love, the weight of time apart, and the lightness of coming home. Neither spoke as Emma crossed the clearing. Words had brought them together and words had torn them apart. But now, in this moment, silence held everything they needed to say. When she reached him, Luke's arms enfolded her with the same quiet strength she remembered, and Emma felt the last pieces of her heart click into place. "You're late," he murmured into her hair. "Got lost on the way home," she whispered back, breathing in his familiar scent of wood shavings and pine. And there, in the gathering dusk beneath the pines, they began again. 1 year later. The cabin had grown with their love, expanding to accommodate the merging of 2 lives. Luke's workshop now housed a small writing desk by its largest window, where Emma could work on her new book while watching him craft. Her laptop shared space with his wood samples, their different tools for telling stories. Emma's blog had evolved, becoming less about destinations and more about journeys of the heart. She wrote about sustainable living, about finding beauty in simplicity, about the art of crafting a life by hand. Her readers followed her transformation from wanderer to homesteader, though she never revealed the exact location of their sanctuary. Luke's work had found a wider audience too, though he shipped his pieces anonymously. Each carefully crafted table and chair carried a small signature, a carved pine branch, a symbol of their shared story. His designs began incorporating elements of their life together, hidden compartments for Emma's notebooks, reading nooks built into unexpected corners. Their evenings still ended on the porch, watching the sun paint the mountains in impossible colors. Sometimes they read aloud from their growing library, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, and sometimes they planned their future in quiet voices that carried no further than each other's hearts. "Do you ever miss it?" Luke asked one evening as Emma closed her laptop after finishing an article. "The traveling, the cities, the excitement?" Emma leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength of his chest. "I traded artificial lights for stars," she said, and manufactured stories for real ones. She turned to face him, tracing the familiar lines of his face. Besides, the best adventures are the ones that bring you home. Above them, the pines swayed in the mountain breeze, their ancient whispers a reminder that some stories, like some loves, are meant to last forever. In their shared sanctuary, Emma and Luke had found something rare, a love built not on grand gestures or perfect moments, but on quiet mornings, honest work, and the courage to keep choosing each other. Day after day, beneath the eternal pines,